Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The Miami sun bathed the international airport in a dazzling light, making the glass facades and private jets lined up on the tarmac shimmer. Among the bustling crowd of travelers, a pilot with a serene face stood straight, his immaculate uniform reflecting his discipline and professionalism. His name was Marcus Jefferson, in his 50s, calm and self-assured. Yet no one in that terminal would have guessed that he was more than just a pilot. Marcus was the owner of Skylux Airlines, a global airline he had built from the ground up. His fortune, though colossal, was never flaunted. He preferred discretion to ostentation. As he walked towards his private jet, an airport security officer, his face stern and his expression authoritarian, abruptly blocked his path. The man, Officer Brad Thompson, a 35-year-old white man with overconfidence and a tendency to judge without thinking, scrutinized him. "Sir, you cannot enter here without special permission," he ordered condescendingly. Marcus remained calm, but his eyes shone with a light that Thompson's arrogance could not comprehend. "I am the pilot of this flight," he replied firmly. "Pilot? Here?" Thompson retorted, raising his eyebrows, as if the mere mention of his uniform didn't justify his access. "You must show your badge and papers immediately." At that precise moment, Marcus felt the tension rising, but he said nothing. He knew that the public humiliation was not only unjust, it was also ridiculous. Yet, this police officer didn't know that by refusing to obey, he was confronting the man who owned the jet, the crew, and the entire airline. What Thompson didn't know was that every word he uttered was a provocation against someone who, in an instant, could make his career and reputation disappear, and that these were not empty threats. Marcus took a deep breath and, with almost icy calm, replied, "Officer, I ask you to step back and let me pass. Otherwise, you may regret this moment for the rest of your life." An icy silence settled in the hall. The travelers around them froze, intrigued by this confrontation which seemed innocuous, but which hid immense power behind an apparently ordinary face. And in the shadows, security cameras, Marcus's assistants, and even airport staff were recording every detail. This simple act of condescension would trigger a reaction that neither man could have foreseen. The airport terminal was crowded. Families jostled with their luggage, businessmen checked their phones, and weary travelers dragged their suitcases across the gleaming tiles. Marcus Jefferson walked confidently toward the jetway leading to his private jet. His immaculate uniform, upright posture, and calm demeanor reflected years of discipline acquired as a pilot and accomplished entrepreneur. Suddenly, Officer Brad Thompson appeared out of nowhere, like a human wall. Tall, muscular, and sporting a shiny badge on his chest, he blocked Marcus's path. "Sir," he interrupted sharply, "you cannot pass through here. Show your papers immediately." Marcus, used to security checks, was not immediately offended. He took out his pilot's badge, which was in his wallet, and handed it over. "Here you are," he replied calmly. "I am the captain of this flight." But Thompson frowned and shook his head, displaying obvious contempt. "That's not enough," he said, in a tone that mixed authority and condescension. "I want to see your special authorization to access the private area." Marcus felt a dull irritation rising within him, but he remained perfectly calm. He had seen this kind of behavior hundreds of times. Some men, like Thompson, thought they were above the rules simply because they wore a uniform and carried a weapon. "Officer," Marcus said gently, "I showed you my badge and card. You're blocking me for no good reason. Back off, or you risk creating an unnecessary incident." Thompson burst into a condescending laugh. "A pilot who thinks he can tell me what to do? You're either arrogant or stupid. In any case, I forbid you to pass." At that moment, a small crowd began to gather around them. The travelers wondered what was causing this tension, but no one intervened yet. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward, enough to show that he would not give in, but without threatening. "Officer Thompson, you don't know who you're talking to," he said, his voice low but icy. "I'm Marcus Jefferson, owner of Skylux Airlines. I could have you arrested for obstruction of justice and defamation. But I'll give you a chance to correct this mistake. Step back. Thompson looked at him with contempt, believing Marcus was bluffing. A wealthy pilot claiming to own the company? I doubt you have that kind of power. I enforce the rules here, and you're just another employee. Marcus smiled slightly, almost imperceptibly, but behind that smile lay a firm resolve. Every word Thompson said would be recorded. Every act of humiliation would be used against him. He knew the police officer's blind arrogance could be used to their detriment, if he played his cards right. Very well, said Marcus, in a measured tone but full of implicit threat. Keep me here, and you'll see what it costs to underestimate someone you don't know. Silence fell over the hall. Curious eyes watched them. Security cameras recorded everything. Thompson, confident and still unaware of Marcus's true identity, couldn't imagine that every second he spent humiliating him was paving the way for his own downfall. And Marcus, with all the patience and control for which he was known, was preparing to show him that you don't mess with a man who owns not only the jet, but the entire airline, with impunity. Thompson's face was red with frustration. He clenched his jaw, unable to understand why a mere pilot dared to stand up to him. The crowd around them began to murmur, intrigued by this scene that was taking an unexpected turn. Some passers-by took out their phones to film the altercation. Sir, you are overstepping your bounds. Thompson shouted, attempting to regain control of the situation. I order you to step back immediately. Marcus, ever calm, took a step forward, never raising his voice, but each word was charged with authority. Officer, I advise you to verify your facts before proceeding. You are creating a public spectacle and recording evidence of your abusive behavior. Thompson burst into a sarcastic laugh. Proof? For whom? Do you really think anyone is going to listen to you? You're just one employee among thousands. It was at this moment that Marcus chose to act subtly. He took out his phone and, with a discreet gesture, sent a quick message to his personal assistant. A few seconds later, a small group of Skylux Airlines employees appeared on the tarmac, cameras in hand, making sure everything was filmed. Officer Thompson, Marcus continued, I strongly suggest you step back now. You're being recorded. Every word, every gesture is being captured by multiple witnesses and cameras. You could be held liable for obstruction and abuse of power. Thompson, still believing Marcus was bluffing, raised his voice to intimidate the crowd. Enough. I order you to leave. But the tension had changed. Passers-by, witnesses to the scene, began to whisper among themselves, some taking Marcus's side without even knowing him. Sir, said a woman from the crowd, why is this policeman blocking you? You're clearly a pilot. A murmur of approval rippled through the assembly. Thompson felt his authority erode under the gaze of the crowd and the security camera. His arrogance began to waver. Marcus, seizing the moment, took another step forward, calm and self-assured. Officer, you are violating my rights and discriminating against me. I'm giving you one last chance to rectify this situation. Otherwise, you will answer for your actions before your superiors, and believe me, it won't be pretty for you. Airport employees were also beginning to approach, intrigued by this escalation. Thompson, now aware that the crowd was watching him and that the evidence was mounting against him, felt a shiver of unease. But his pride still refused to budge. Very well, he said reluctantly. But I will not tolerate your insolence. Marcus smiled inwardly. He knew the scene was now under control. This was no longer a simple argument. Every word Thompson spoke, every act of humiliation he attempted to inflict, would be documented and used to turn the tables. The policeman's arrogance had just met its match, and that wall had a name, Marcus Jefferson, billionaire and master of the situation. As Marcus prepared to step off the gangway into his jet, Thompson finally realized he had underestimated the man he had tried to humiliate, but it was already too late. The crowd, the cameras, and the witnesses had recorded every detail, and Marcus's revenge was only just beginning. Marcus Jefferson finally stepped down the gangway to his private jet, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with Thompson's growing nervousness. But instead of disappearing behind the aircraft door, Marcus made a subtle gesture to his assistant. A small, silent notification on his phone immediately triggered the arrival of a private security team and Skylux Airlines personnel. The policeman, still frozen on the tarmac, didn't yet understand that his arrogance would backfire. Marcus addressed him in a measured but icy tone. "Officer Thompson, I gave you a chance. Now your actions are visible to everyone, including your superiors." Thompson attempted to regain his authority. "You cannot threaten me like this in the performance of my duties." Marcus nodded, almost sympathetically. "This isn't a threat, it's a fact. The video you just created will go all the way to your supervisor and the airport department. Your actions and words will be analyzed, and your behavior could be disciplined." At that precise moment, one of Marcus's assistants approached with a phone connected to the airport's control screens, broadcasting the confrontation live on the monitors in the main hall. The crowd, now much larger, could see Thompson humiliating Marcus, unaware that he had just become the central figure in a public humiliation. The murmurs turned into indignant whispers. Passengers, journalists who happened to be there, and airport employees began filming and commenting on the incident. Every word Thompson said, every authoritarian and condescending gesture, was captured and recorded. Marcus took a step forward, his voice clear and calm. "Officer Thompson, I strongly recommend you make a smart move now. You can back down, apologize, and avoid serious consequences for your career." Thompson, red with anger and shame, froze for a moment. Pride forbade him from giving in, but he could already feel the gaze of his superiors upon him through the cameras. Every second of hesitation worsened his situation. "Very well," he murmured finally, unable to utter anything else, as Marcus turned on his heel and got into the jet. Once inside, Marcus settled in, calm and unperturbed. He cast one last look at the policeman. "Officer," he said softly but authoritatively, "remember, humiliating someone without knowing who they are can be dangerous." The jet started up, and the drone of the engines drowned out the murmur of the witnesses. Thompson, left on the tarmac, felt for the first time the shame of his arrogance. He knew an investigation would be launched, that his superiors would review the footage, and that his reputation would suffer a severe blow. Marcus, meanwhile, watched the city recede from the cockpit. A silent satisfaction washed over him. He had never raised his voice, never used force. His only weapons had been patience, strategy, and intelligence. And the police officer who thought he had him under control had just received the most public and definitive lesson of his life. Marcus Jefferson's private jet sliced through the clouds above Miami, but on the tarmac, Officer Brad Thompson was still reeling from the embarrassment. Security cameras, passenger phones, and the videos playing on the airport screens had transformed his condescension into instant public humiliation. Airport management had launched an investigation, and Thompson knew his career was now on the line. Meanwhile, Marcus had settled into the comfort of his jet, but he hadn't finished his lesson. He discreetly contacted the airport's head of security, a man with whom he had a strong professional relationship. "Hello, this is Marcus Jefferson," he said calmly. "I've just had an incident with Officer Thompson. I'd like him to be temporarily suspended until this situation is clarified." A few minutes later, the police officer's phone vibrated with an official order for immediate suspension. The message, sent directly from airport management, stated that his behavior had been deemed inappropriate and that a disciplinary investigation was underway. Thompson felt a wave of dizziness. His arrogance, his blind confidence, had just crumbled in an instant. But Marcus didn't stop there. With a simple call to his public relations team, he had a discreet but effective statement released. "Passenger safety and respect are paramount. Any situation where an employee abuses their authority will be dealt with the utmost rigor. We thank the airport for its cooperation and professionalism." The news spread through local media within hours. Thompson was now known not only at the airport but also on social media as the police officer who had humiliated a billionaire, without knowing who he was. Marcus, seated in his jet, watched the landscape unfold beneath him. He had never shouted, never made an open threat. His victory had been complete and elegant. Thompson had been publicly humiliated. The police officer's career was now in danger. Marcus had maintained his dignity and composure. And above all, he had proven that blind arrogance could turn against those who possess it. As the jet gained altitude, Marcus leaned slightly over the instrument panel and murmured, almost to himself. True power lies in patience, intelligence, and strategy. Arrogance never stands a chance against that. Within hours, Marcus Jefferson's name was everywhere, but this time, not just as a discreet billionaire, but as a man capable of transforming a humiliating situation into a masterclass in power and control. Thompson, for his part, would never forget that confrontation. And every time he came across Marcus Jefferson's name, he would be reminded that beneath a uniform or a badge, some men wield a power that neither brute force nor arrogance can match. Lesson learned, Marcus turned his gaze towards the horizon. The world was vast, but every misjudgment would be paid for sooner or later, especially when you were playing with someone who had built an empire from nothing.